Thanks everyone for making the time to come along to this webinar. It's the first in a series that myself and my colleague Sian Mulgrew, who can't be here today, are hoping to run. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that wherever we're zooming in from today, we're all meeting on the lands of traditional owners of this country. And for me, that is the Woiwurrung Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation in Melbourne. But I also work across Bunurong land very regularly. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, as well as acknowledging the strength and knowledge of all First Nations people, especially if there's any who are here with us today. And I acknowledge that these lands were never ceded, but were stolen under the falsehood of terra nullius. You've got a slightly different lineup today than you might have thought. It's myself, Rosie Dodd, and Lisa Townsend, who's here with me. And hopefully you can see both of our videos well. I've pinned us. We did say it was going to be Sian Mulgrew from CHP, but she's unfortunately not able to make it. So it's us two, and we're going to have a conversation about relationships, specifically with a focus on resetting if people have been in kind of crisis mode, and then moving into a longer term support relationship with the workers and what that is like. And then also talking about repairing if that relationship has challenges along the way. So, Lisa, did you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name's Lisa Townsend. I'm part of the Peer Education and Support Program with CHP. I've been doing it for about 16 months. And yeah, I've had a range of different experiences with homelessness. So yeah, now it's good to kind of give a lived experience point of view and help people coming into the sector and yeah, know how to connect with their consumer. So yeah.
Thank you.
That's me.
Lisa and I have been doing some training together now for a couple of months, and I walk away from every session feeling like I've learned something, and I get a lot out of hearing from Lisa, especially from your perspective on what it's like to receive support. Just a few housekeeping things before we kick off. If you can stay on mute, just so we don't have any audio interruptions, and then use the chat box if you have questions along the way, and we'll make sure we've got some time at the end for questions and answers from Lisa and myself as well. And I would suggest to maximize your viewing, you might want to toggle up to the top right of your corner of your screen to select speaker view, up to you. Otherwise, you've got the gallery view option as well. So a little bit about me. I work at CHP, the Council to Homeless Persons, the peak body for homelessness services in Victoria, as the Housing First Specialist, which is a part-time role that I've got. And I do that largely because of an opportunity I had with a few other Australian practitioners. I can see one of them, Tamara Sakera from New South Wales, is here with us as well. So a group of us, late 2019, were very fortunate to be selected to travel to Europe to undertake some training with the Housing First Europe Hub. So that's a collection of Housing First organisations that provide specialised Housing First support in Europe. And much like Eurovision, we were the Australian ring-ins for that year, and we got to go across and participate in some training, which was a fabulous experience. And the idea being that then we would come back and deliver training to the sector here. So that's part of my role. And then the rest of my week, I work at Launch Housing, where I'm the coordinator of the Melbourne Street to Home program, which is a support program designed from Housing First principles. And I moved into that role a number of years ago now as a case manager, and I'd come from IAP, working at an access point. And for me, that was a really interesting transition, where I was used to working in that kind of crisis mode where you saw people for a short amount of time and they had a lot going on, and you tried to resolve some of those issues, try and ideally find some accommodation for the night, and then you potentially didn't see them again. Or if you did, it was maybe sometime down the track. And it was really that kind of like brief intervention, short, sharp work. And I was used to doing that, but then I moved across into providing support as a case manager in Melbourne Street to Home. And it's a lot different in the sense that you're able to work with people longer term, you get to build those relationships. And for me, that was a real learning to adjust my practice to work out or how do I do longer term support, and how do I manage when I'm used to people coming in crisis, and then I need to kind of slow down for myself. Lisa's just put her camera off because her dog's barking. So she's going to take her dog next door. The joys of working from home. But I guess for me, it was a really interesting learning, and I thought it was relevant to share some of that today with you, and hopefully whatever role you're in, you're going to take some things away and be able to put them into practice. An example that I had from when I first moved from working in IAP to case managing someone, the handover document I got for this particular woman said that she wanted to go to the doctor. And so I contacted her. We had our first couple of chats, and I said, oh, you know, I got told from your previous worker that you wanted to go to the GP. Is that something you still want to do? She said, yes. I said, cool, I can make you an appointment. She said, yep, we did. I did the standard stuff. I texted her beforehand. I called her a few days before, offered to pick her up and take her there. She said, no, I'll meet you there. So I got there, sat in the waiting room. She wasn't there. Sat around, called, texted, no, not coming. And then a few hours later, she said, oh, sorry, something came up. Let's try again. So we went through that again and made another appointment, blah, 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 blah. You can potentially imagine where this ended up, that we did this maybe 3 or 4 times, to the point where the GP said, I'm not going to keep booking appointments for her. And I went back to her and I found her one day where she was sitting. She used to beg or coal bite to make money. And I said, oh, you haven't made it to a few of these doctor's appointments I've been making. And she said, yeah, I'm really struggling. Like I want to go, but I've got so much else on and I just can't get there. And it was the perfect opportunity to then have a really honest conversation, where it eventually came out. She said she was just agreeing because she thought that I wanted her to go to the doctor. I said, no, I don't mind if you to go to the doctor or not. And it was a really good opportunity to have a really honest conversation. She did want to go to the doctor, and we worked out a plan that it would work best on her payday to go, because then she didn't have to worry about making money up. So that might be a nice segue, Lisa, to chatting about what we were talking about earlier, where you were saying have an out. Did you want to talk a bit more about that?
Absolutely. I think we're all human and we all have emotions. And I think when you're living in crisis, and you've been living in crisis for so long, it's easy to think that anyone talking to you, saying something to you, it's a personal attack. So I think it's important to sort of have a discussion early days in the working relationship, and sort of like, you know, recognize that things might get heated, there might be miscommunications, there might be misunderstandings, and if the conversation isn't being, or the meeting isn't being productive, you know, we can leave it and we can come back to it later. But when you say you're going to come back to it, you must come back to it. I think it just acknowledges the fact that we're entitled to feel. There's so much disappointment. There's so much disheartening, I guess, you know, distrust with a lot of people that are coming into the program. I myself, like, I had 4 years on the streets of Melbourne because I had no faith in the system. I was tired. I was exhausted going back to the intake points, 8:30 every morning. You know, if I was lucky to get a play, I just got to the point I went, no, I can't do it. I'd rather, you know, stay where I am, warm, and sleep while I can, kind of thing. Like with everything else going on, complex mental health issues, undiagnosed, addiction, you know, trauma and everything like that. Sorry, have I gone off subject, Rosie?
No, not at all. That's where I was aiming to get to. So can you talk a bit more about that, Lisa, what it was like when you go into an access point and what that led to?
Absolutely exhausting. I mean, beside the fact it's first in, best rest, if you're not there by a certain time, you're not going to get in, so there's no luck. So you spend the whole day, you could be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, you spend the whole day sitting waiting, and for the funding and for whatever to get approved. By 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you might be lucky to have them come out and say, all right, you're off, you're going to, you know, this area, to this motel, sorry, you've got 1 night or you've got 3 nights. You may be lucky to get a $20 Coles voucher or something like that, so you've got food, but then you don't know what sort of cooking appliances and stuff like that are in the room, so you don't know what food to get. So by the time you get to the motel, it's like 9-10 o'clock at night. By the time you sort of wind down, have a shower, relax, you're looking at 12-1 o'clock in the morning. So you're lucky to get 4 or 5 hours sleep, if that, to be up again and to travel all the way back to the intake point to hopefully get another room. So you can imagine that every 24 hours, like every day or every 3 days, having to go through that. Like by the end of the week, you're so exhausted. And the reason that you end up homeless, or you've ended up in that position in the first place, is in the far back corner of your mind, because you're dealing with that moment, you're dealing with what you're doing there. So that's where trauma, start that holding it in, and that's when real damage can be done, because it's left to the back of your mind. So yeah.
So there's 2 things I want to pick up on there. So you kind of touched on how exhausting it would be if you were just constantly going back into the entry point service, and I guess that's what we talk about when we mean people get fatigued, like system fatigue. They're just over it.
Yeah.
And they feel pretty let down. But then the second point, around when you're like trying to get your needs met in that crisis environment, and you go in and you talk to someone in that work, what's that like for yourself, and how did you present yourself if you were going into a crisis service?
I'd almost have a spiel, where I'd go in and I'd say the things, because, once 3, 4, 5 times, what they want to hear, what they need to hear to help you. So you almost get a spiel in your head. And although the person hearing it might be like, oh God, that's awful. Well, I know for me, like I was disconnected to the work. Like I had this spiel in my head that I knew I had to say. But as far as like, sorry, if my hands were tied up, I couldn't talk. As far as like, sorry, I've lost my train of thought, Rosie.
So you had that sense that you had to say certain things?
Yeah, and I'd have a spiel, and it's like I'd talk through it, and I'd say like, whatever, like mental health, trauma, addiction, whatever it was, abuse. But yeah, they were just words. There was no, like I had no even though they'd happened to me, I had no emotional connection to what I was blurting out to these people. And I think it was a self-preservation. I think it's a form of like, yeah, preserving yourself, keeping yourself safe. Because when you're homeless and you're in that circle, all you've got is you know. So you got to protect yourself, and if that means working out a sentence that you say to people when you're trying to get support, that's what it is. And I think the importance of the way things are looking now with different case managers and whatnot, I love the fact that it's highlighted that there's a respect, and there's a relationship, and there's a rapport and trust that needs to be built before the real work can be done.
So let's talk a bit more about that. How, when you were no longer accessing services in crisis, you got access to a longer term case management program, didn't you? And what was it like having that experience suddenly of not needing to, well, what was that like?
Looking back, it was a game changer. At the time, I just sort of, that whole eye roll, here we go again. Let's see where this takes us, because I'd been let down so many times in the past. So I thought, to me, it sounded too good to be true. So I was it took me a while to properly engage with my case manager and realize that she was there for me, and she was there to help me and to get, she was the first one that like looked at what I was dealing with, looked at situations that were a result of underlying mental health, undiagnosed mental health issues, childhood trauma, abuse, just things that are, she looked past, or like not past it, but rather than sort of looking and saying, okay, yeah, well, that's a result of that, we'll just let her plod along on her own. She sort of looked at me and she went, you're not right. You're not right. And this is what we need. I'm here to sort of help you get right. Like my family and friends, they saw past it all. I didn't leave my house for 8 months and everyone just kept bringing shopping and stuff like that to me. No one sort of sat down with me and went, why can't you leave your house? And that I think was a game changer for me, because she built the trust, built the relationship, and then the more comfortable I felt around her, like she didn't sort of come in and write, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to fix you. She let me be, for the first time in years, be in control of my life. And I think that was the main thing. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. Oh wow. I think that was the difference between her and, in 6 short months, like she spun my life on its head. And I'm still in contact with her now. And I always say to her, I wouldn't be here. Like if it weren't for you, you literally changed my life in 6 months, more than anyone had done in 10 years. And she's like, it was all you. And it's like, it's not. It's not. She gave me the tools. She showed me the way. And she gave me the skills that, as a heroin addict for 25 years, I didn't have. I didn't, basic things like putting the bins out once a week, stuff like that was really difficult for me. I'd if I had $1 for every time I chased a bin truck down the street at 5 o'clock in the morning, I tell you what. But yeah, sorry, Ray,
No.
Blubber and mess. Look at me.
Oh, well, you've had a bit of a rough day. For everyone's knowledge, Lisa had her second vaccine yesterday and is feeling the effects today. So
I feel like I've been hit by a bus, but it's all good. I'm vaccinated now.
We'll soldier on.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, someone said in the chat that it is so powerful to hear that about the connection and the relationship. And yeah, we're not going to apologize for crying. I'm prepared in case.
I need my sorry jar, don't I? Yeah.
I think what you were touching on there as well relates so much to why I'm personally very excited, and I think you are too, Lisa, about the Housing First principles being incorporated into services these days. I know we've got quite a few H2H workers on the line, and H2H was designed based on the Housing First principles for Australia. And the reason that they're so relevant and that they're supported by evidence relates to some of the things you're picking up on, Lisa, like giving people choice and control over the direction of their support, having that flexibility of support so it can be long-term, providing that really creative, assertive outreach support, active engagement where the worker sticks with people no matter what and through ups and downs. So when we were chatting a bit earlier today, you talked about how you had that spiel and you would go to those hard-hitting points to try and get support. And for me, that's what I think that as a service system, we've often kind of trained people to do to get our attention as workers, that they've been through the system long enough to realise there's certain things that if they say, they're going to get a particular response. And for you, Lisa, you also said that when you'd raise certain things with your effective worker, this worker who changed your life and is so amazing, she didn't necessarily probe.
No.
Did you want to talk a bit more about that and what that meant for the relationship you built?
Absolutely. Like in the past, when I sort of alluded to trauma and things that have happened in my life, like straight away it was like, oh, well, let's talk about that. And having her sort of not you know, if I talk about, I've got some pretty alarming things that have happened in my life, you know, to someone that hasn't sort of been homeless or been mentally ill or had addiction issues or been in an abusive relationship. Like, there's a few things that I would speak of, and it'd get that like, oh, you know, reaction. She didn't do that, and she didn't push me to unpack and talk about things that made me uncomfortable. It was like she took a mental note, and then whether it be the next appointment, whether it be, you know, 3 appointments down the track, if I were to sort of talk to that again, then she'd sort of ask me, you know, I heard you mention that a couple of weeks ago, you know, did you want to talk a bit more about it? And that whole do you want to, you know, I don't think I was ever asked that. I was just asked, you know, tell me. And you know, little things like that make a world of difference. It's just putting the power back. It's giving power back to someone that feels like they've been stripped of it.
And you also mentioned that it was like a feeling of kindness, that she had been listening to you.
Yeah.
She then recalled a conversation down the track.
Yeah. And it made me think that, like, she wasn't just there doing her job, you know, like she wasn't just there to fill in her work hours of the day. She gave a shit, sorry for the term, but it's true. You know, like her heart was in it, and you could see it. And I quite often, in the other training we do, I quite often sort of allude to my effective and my ineffective worker. Not that either of them, you know, like they both had good intentions, but with hindsight now, looking back, I can totally see the difference and totally see who's in the job because they want to help people. They're in the job for the love of it. They're in it because they care. But then there's someone that just turns up to do the 9-to-5 thing, do whatever I have to do to keep the boss happy, and I'm on my way, you know, meet my goals, tick off the targets kind of thing. And it's like, at the end, that's all good and proper. But at the end of that, I was left feeling alone. I was left feeling like another program had let me down. And even after sort of reaching out to her boss and sort of saying, you know, there's a miscommunication, I wasn't heard. You know, moving forward, it was just a matter of circumstances that she was actually moved on to somewhere else, and I got another worker. I'm not saying she was a bad worker, not at all. But I just think in the manner she like looked at what her role was, what her job was completely different. Like, it came from a completely different place to what my effective worker, it came from her heart, you know. And I think that I was, like I said before, I was a heroin addict for 24 plus years. Let's be honest, don't bullshit a bullshitter. Yeah, I can see through people, and it's because of that street bravado, you know, that I've had to have to survive over the years. And like, if someone's not being authentic, big red light for me, you know. And that I think, yeah, now kind of looking back at it, to put a word to it, it's that authenticity.
So let's talk about that a bit more. How does someone demonstrate authenticity effectively?
I just think, you know, hearing the person, asking what they're, you know, but like I said, putting the person back in control of their life, asking what their hopes and dreams are, and not only listening, but like hearing them. You know, so much so that down the track, when you're not with them, you're thinking about little things that you might be able to suggest to them to maybe push them out of their comfort box a little. But you think, you know, like, she put PESP in front of me. I would never have done or gone and tried something like this on my own. She presented the opportunity, and then she left it.
So this is the opportunity that you have now, the PESP program, which is what you do as speaking. Yeah.
and she left it. And this went on like in every couple of weeks, you know, she'd touch back on it again. And it was like she planted the seed and then she let it grow. And honestly, like she just gets, you know, you'd be brilliant at this, Lise. You know, you know your stuff, you know what you're talking about. And I always used to say to her about, and I talk about it in the sessions as well with Rosie and Sean, I vividly remember sitting, I think it was Burke Street or somewhere like that, 3 o'clock in the morning, like my squat was rained out, so there was water everywhere and it was freezing cold and I had no blankets or anything like that. My jacket wasn't thick enough. Like it was just one of those snap cold nights that like wasn't expected, so I wasn't prepared. And I was sitting there at like 3 o'clock in the morning and I just sort of thought, like, I'd love to be able to find a platform where I can say that people like, hey, you're doing it wrong. You know, and then boom, this came along. And it's just like, yeah, and I don't think if she hadn't been committed to helping me, I don't think I'd be doing it, because she wouldn't have pushed me. Not pussy, I'm using the wrong text. She didn't push me. She encouraged me. Yeah, maybe a gentle push, you know, but like she fed my self-esteem. She fed my confidence. And in the end, when I filled in the application, it was my decision, you know, and like she sort of sat there saying, you know, see what you did. And it's like when I found out that I'd been accepted, she's like, see what you did. And I'm like, no, I didn't. You know, this is you. She's like, no, it was all you. It was all you. And she's still to this day, it's all you. Stop thanking me. Stop that. But she just went that extra step. And I think this is why I get so excited about the Housing First principles and the way that people are now talking about homelessness. I think COVID presented a really unique opportunity for people to sort of stop and go, you know what, that could be me. You know, oh my God, it doesn't take much to end up there. You know, so I think it's as shitty as it's been, let's be honest. I think it's created a really unique opportunity for change in this sect. Like, I don't know, I'll get off my soapbox now, sorry.
No, I love hearing that experience you had where you identified that this is what you wanted to be doing, and then your case manager was able to link you up to that. Like, and that shows, her deep listening, and that she was caring about you as an individual and thought outside the box. And I think that authenticity idea around how we build relationships, a way that I've done it as a case manager when I'm first working with someone, kind of alluding back to that anecdote I told at the start where I tried to make the doctor's appointment, thought I was doing the right thing. That prompted a conversation with me and that woman to then where I said, it's going to take a little bit of time for us to get to know each other and how we both work. And that also includes like how fast to go, you know, how often I should contact you, and just really naming all of that stuff up front about what the relationship looks like. And we were talking a bit about that earlier, hey, that it's a relationship like you have with other people in the world, between worker and client, two people, and occasionally you're going to rub up the wrong way. We're going to both get on each other's nerves at times, potentially, and just naming that stuff, like you said, Lisa, about having an out and saying, you know, we're going to have times when we disagree, or we're going to have difficult conversations, and how do we manage that? So that's what I wanted to talk about as well, that kind of repairing after a rupture in the relationship or after a challenge. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it was kind of like a light bulb moment when we were talking about it before, because I don't think I've kind of unpacked it like that. But I remember my effective kind of sitting there and saying, like you said, you know, we're human. You know, we get emotional. Things can be misunderstood or misconstrued. You know, so having recognizing that, I think it's empowering for the client, because it means that with all of because you know, the trauma and shit and the disappointment and the bent up emotions that sit with someone that's been homeless for a long time, it's a lot. It's a lot. And just being able to let them know that they're fully entitled to feel, you know, whether it means that they yell and scream and throw something, as long as I don't throw it at you. Like, you know, you let them know, like, it's yeah, I mean, it's human nature. Everyone gets emotional or may misunderstand something, or you know, just not be having a good day, and you might rub up against someone the wrong way. So I think letting them know before it happens that it's okay. I think it's another step in building that rapport, building trust, and letting the client know that, yeah, like, they're entitled to feel like that. They're entitled to be angry. They're entitled to be disappointed. Like, yeah, because I think there's this sense in the homeless community that we're not allowed to, like, you know, with other times, sorry, when I've, train of thought there, other workers I've had, and if things have become heated, or, you know, the discussion hasn't gone right, it's like, all right, no, you're done, off the program, you know. So I think making a point of letting them know that they can be human, you know, they can feel their emotions, they can talk through them. I think that's probably one of it. Like, it's a shortcut in the whole rapport, relationship building, you know, letting someone know that they're fully entitled to feel what they're feeling.
Because you mentioned as well that it can be that people might have a bit of an external shell. Like, you've definitely talked about your echidna persona.
Yep.
Spikes out.
That's how I used to see myself. Like, I'd be walking around, I'd be fine, and then as soon as someone had come in my space, it'd be like the strutting peacock, I used to call it. Shoulders back, chest out, like, come on, come near me, you know. And it was a bravado. I'm not that person. You know, I may look rough around the edges, but I'm not that person. I didn't like being that person. Not at all. But it was a self-preservation was something I had to do.
And so if a worker had named with you and said it's okay to feel all these different emotions, whatever they are, it's like giving you permission that you don't have to keep up that persona or that brave face.
Yeah.
And I often think, if I'm on the receiving end of someone, you know, being pretty heightened or upset or angry, whatever it is, or that they say, you know, I'm fired as a worker, or I'm the worst worker ever, I'm useless. I often think about that in the context that for many people we're supporting, this relationship may be the only thing they feel like they can effectively exercise control over. And also it might be a safe enough space that they can reject us. Because the other relationships in their life, either they're not in control or they're not safe, and we're the first opportunity to model that really normal, positive relationship where it can go through ups and downs, but we can fix it again.
Yeah. It's not the end, you know, like, I think sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Keep talking, Rosie.
Well, I think,
sorry.
No, you're fine. I think in terms of repairing, we've talked a bit about that. Like, I've certainly had people fire me and express a lot of frustration at me. And then I think in this work, the work is around then fixing that and repairing it.
That's what I was going to say. In that moment, it's like, because like I said, when you're on the street, you've got that bravado, you've got that hard shell, and you've got that, like, you know, piss off kind of body language. So when you come across someone that's telling you that it's okay to feel like that and whatnot, it can be a bit like, how can I say it? Like, it's not something that happened overnight, you know. It was because of, like, 4 years of doing that whole, you know, strutting peacock, like I said. It took a long time to break that down. But at the same time, like I said, my knowing that it was a safe environment, and I could get emotional, and I could get angry, and I could express my frustrations in that. Again, I think that was another like shortcut to a trusting relationship. Yeah.
And so if there were times when you did get really frustrated or you needed to take a break, how does an effective worker come back again, or how do you fix it after you've had a challenge?
Just being, what I appreciated the most was just being straight up honest and saying, I can, but not condescending. Yeah. I can hear your frustration. I can hear you're upset. Look, let's just shelve this for now. Go get a drink of water, splash some water on your face, go get a bit of fresh air. I'll call you back in 10 minutes, or we'll I'll come back this afternoon if it's face to face or whatever. But just acknowledging that they're entitled to be upset, they're entitled to be angry, but it's not productive in that moment. And I think, again, that goes back to being able to do that, goes back to sort of making a point of it when things are calm, when things are good, and saying, even recalling it and saying, remember when we first met, we spoke about, and just saying it like that, like, I'll come back to you soon. I think it's just, but at the same time, like if someone's in crisis and they're, looking at self-harm or anything like that, of course you're not going to leave them. But I mean, verbal, like just that spur of the moment, you may be the only person they interact with, so you're going to cop everything. You're going to cop the highs, the lows, the in-betweens, the goods, the bads, and the uglies. Like that's just the reality of it. And I mean, what's the saying? We hurt the ones we love. I'm not saying it's a love relationship, but if you're the only person that's interacting with them on a regular basis, you're going to cop it all. So I think, yeah.
And then you've talked, I think, as well in the past about going off at someone or having, a rough day, but then feeling awful afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think for the worker to keep that in mind. Hey.
And to also kind of, if a discussion has gone like that, and always touch base, just touch base, whether it's a couple of hours later or the next day, or just touch base. I guess put yourself in their shoes and think about how they might be feeling if they're isolated, if they've got mental health issues or addiction. It's like there's so much you guys you just have to take into account. But I think it's human. We're all human. And I think if we can just blur that line, like us and them, which a lot of homeless people think, like use the system and the system's against us kind of thing. I think, just that acknowledgement and that recognition, I think it can blur the lines.
Yeah, I think some ways I've done it in the past is just send a text a little bit afterwards to say, I know you're really frustrated, you feel really let down, I haven't been able to do what you wanted, or, you're disappointed about XYZ. I'll call you again tomorrow, or I'm thinking of you and I'm going to text you in a couple of hours or give you a buzz before I leave work today. And still expecting someone might still, read that text and throw their phone across the room or not want to speak to me again, but, just continuing to go back and
just a reminder that, you're there.
Yeah.
And that in itself is so powerful, because that's the thing, like homelessness, it's a lonely road, so lonely. I've never been more lonely in my life, surrounded by thousands of people, but there on my own, and I think, again, it goes back to that self-preservation. You let someone in, you're scared to let your guard down, and then when you do, it doesn't go well, and you think straight away it's all over.
Right.
So when you see someone making an effort to still come back, even though you fired them, the day before or something like that, seeing someone still come back after you've said some awful things, I think that speaks volumes to someone in crisis, especially.
Yeah, that really hits me to think of feeling so lonely and someone potentially acting in the moment, and we know that people have experienced significant trauma, and so we know that they're in fight or flight mode, like it's just survival, hey?
Yeah.
And maybe they've reacted in anger and they wish they hadn't, they take it back, and if they then thought, gosh, the person in my life who I've been leaning on is going to leave me now because I said XYZ, that's an awful space to leave someone in.
Yeah. And it's just because of my life, I internalize.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people that have found themselves, without a home with shit going on, I think there's a lot of self-destructive behavior. And I think it just comes from feeling like you're doing the wrong thing all the time.
Mm.
When you're sleeping rough, you always got people moving you on, or police coming, while you're loitering around, stuff like you constantly, even when you're in space where you know that you're welcome, you constantly feel like you're doing something wrong.
Mm. So it's important for us to follow through as well when we say that we're going to do something in that instance. So if we're trying to repair, and I said to you, okay, Lisa, I'm going to give you a couple of hours to cool off. I'm going to call you at 4:00. I have to call at 4:00. Hey,
bang on 4:00, because I can only speak for me. Yeah. But I know myself in the past, like I've sat there and I've paid out, like I said, I internalize. So the minute something goes wrong or something goes bad, I sit there and I start dissecting it and turning the blame on me, even if I wasn't to blame. And that was just, like I said, from constantly feeling like every time I did something, it was something wrong. I sleep somewhere, I get woken up, move on. I sit down somewhere to eat, move on. It just yeah.
Well, you and I could keep talking for hours.
I could talk till I was blue in the face.
So if people have questions and you want to type them into the chat, it'll be easier than unmuting, because there's too many people on the call, I think, to unmute. But if you want to type it in, we'll take as many questions as we can. But I think we've covered off lots of what I was hoping we would get to in terms of kind of establishing the relationship, our understanding of why people who have been in the system a long time and been in crisis present the way they do, thinking about the impacts of trauma. And that as a service system, we've often taught people to behave in a certain way to get our attention and to run through, the spiel, the heavy hitting things. And then the importance of being really honest and authentic and trying to set the relationship up in a way to be productive, where we're naming, our limitations, and also putting it out there, like we're people, we're going to have emotions. Let's communicate about it.
You know what, Rose? You know what else I was just thinking about? Like, just sort of thinking about it now. I'm only just starting to realize how angry and resentful and full of hate I was when I was living like that. Like, sometimes now, like, I'll see something like that and there'll be my first thought, and then it's like, woo, what are you thinking? But I know where it comes from. I know that it was the persona I had to, and the bravado that I had to put across to other people to survive. Yeah. So I still now, like, I'll have a thought and then I'll be like, oh, yeah, like that. You were so angry, like that you hated the world. Like, I was angry with the world. I really was. And it's been 4 or 5 years now since I was, be 3.5 years. Yeah, since I was homeless. So it just goes to show, like, that whole open-ended support and whatnot is just, priceless. Yeah.
In so many ways, by the sounds of it, that, like, we could start a whole new conversation now to talk about what that's meant in terms of, you've talked about experiencing shorter term support in the past and just feeling like the time frame was really overwhelming. Hey.
Yeah. And I'd obsess about the end date. I'd obsess. Oh, I'm not going to get this done. I'm not going to get this done. So I'd like brain farting out of there, and I wouldn't commit to try and finish to it, knowing that this support is open-ended and that they're going to still be there. You know, if I'm okay the last 2 months, like they're still there. I know that if I hit a brick wall next week, I can ring them up and like boom, and they're there. And you know, just knowing that, because I think the recovery journey from homelessness is massive. Recovery journey from anything's massive, but I think you know, yeah, sorry, I'll go off on a whole other subject now, but so rein me in, remember? Rein me in.
This was going to be our signal today. Yeah. Katie's just popped in the chat, will this recording be available? Yes, Katie, it's being recorded, and probably will go out with CHP's e-news or in some kind of comms about that, but you can email me as well. I might put my email in the chat, and if you request a copy through that, that'll be the way to get it probably. Don't know if anyone else has any other questions, comments. They're all welcome. We're going to be running some more of these sessions over the next couple of months, and so signing up to the CHP e-news is probably the best, most efficient way to make sure you're aware of any more that come up. They won't always be me and Lisa. We're going to touch on a variety of topics, but I think this has been super valuable, Lisa.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I was just looking in the chat. I know you told me to not look and try and focus on that, but I was just looking, like, I think the self-sabotage situation, I think I think it comes down to, and like, you know, what's at the core. What I think we discuss this, like destructive behavior or self-sabotaging or whatnot, because people don't know how to people when you've been living in, you know, it's live in the moment, because that's all you've got kind of thing. It's like there's no daytime, nighttime, it's any time. You know, like the social community when you're homeless around the streets of Melbourne, that took me a long time to adjust to being on my own. This is the first time I've ever lived alone, but thankfully I've got my dog. So I think that whole, it's hard to say because it depends on the individual, but I think you just need to reinforce that, like, I don't even know how to answer that, to be honest.
I can take a go. I missed that question, Bill. Sorry. So Bill was talking about when people have been housed, finding some self-sabotage takes place, like having people over, parties, and asked how do you talk about this with clients. I think it comes back to honesty for me. I think that's what we're talking about with authenticity, is being honest and being able to have difficult conversations with people. So for my mind, that's certainly a situation. I've had that kind of conversation with people, and, you know, Housing First takes an approach that people get a lease that is like anyone else's lease in the community, anyone else renting, it's no different. So just explaining to people there's certain roles and responsibilities in this lease, you have these rights, and your neighbours have their same rights. And if they breached those, there would be consequences, and the same to anyone in H2H or any other program. And that's a difficult conversation to have. And I think we can come at it from a trauma-informed perspective and understanding, Lisa, what you're saying, that there could be pressure in the community. The person could have felt like they've lost control of who comes in and who, you know, they can't say no to people anymore. They might feel like they're being stood over. Whatever else is happening.
They may be struggling being in a place on their own and feel like they need to fill their space with noise and with other people. I know when I first got my place, I brought a few friends from the street that I know back because I felt guilty. I had a spare room, you know, and then I stopped and thought about it, and I'm like, they don't care if I, you know, get kicked out of here. They don't, like, it doesn't, because they'll just pack up and move on to this is my home, this is my castle. And I had to flip the narrative in my head. And sort of realize that this is my space that I busted my ass to get. You know, I need to treat it like I'm the queen and it's my castle, plain and simple. And as soon as I changed the narrative in my head, it completely changed. Like I didn't feel like I owed anything to anyone, because I'd gone out and I'd gotten all my ducks in a row to get to the point where I was housed, and I had a support worker and whatnot. They could do the same. They're just not motivated to do it. You know, they may not know how. I was lucky enough, I had the guidance at North Richmond Community Health. You know, they were brilliant down there. They put me in touch with who I needed to get in touch with, helped me get out everything, you know, like, it sucks that it had to. I mean, this is going back before, I mean, what, this 3-4 years ago, I think. Yeah, 3.5 years ago. Sorry, I'm rambling now, aren't I?
No, I think just to say though that, you know, that is a difficult conversation, but it's one that needs to be had, and just being upfront, like, you're not blaming the person for their choices, you're not judging them, but pointing out what the potential negative consequences are, and then people make a choice.
Yeah.
And they may choose to continue on in the way that it is, and they may end up, you know, getting breached and whatever else. But if you empower people with all the knowledge and all the facts, and you're with them and you stick with them and you explain you will stick with them through whatever choice they make, I think that's the way to go.
And I think just understand that people are going to have to make mistakes to learn. You know, if they get evicted and it's out of your hands, well, you know, you just let them know that you're still there no matter what. I guess that's, and they'll learn for next time, you know. But then again, saying that, like, there could be a lot of underlying issues with the individual. Could be mental health that they don't know how to deal with. So yeah, I think it's a hard one, but it's a really important conversation to kind of look beneath, like, the actual behavior and say, well, where's it coming from?
Definitely.
Yeah.
There was just another question there from Kathleen asking, I think relating to you saying you had to flip the narrative to be the queen of your castle. How did you, or what enabled that, or how did you flip that?
Just seeing them come into my space and being like so entitled. Like, I sort of saw them doing one thing and I kind of looked at them and I'm like, dude, come on, it's my home, like, respect it. And it was just that, and I think there was a bit of sort of like, you know, discouragement from my case manager at the time, like, you know, at least you could be going down a path here. You know, you work so hard to get this house. Do you want to lose it because you feel like you're obliged to let them come and sleep in your spare room? You don't owe anyone anything. Yeah, but I don't think, had I not had a good rapport and a good relationship, I don't think I would have been able to hear that. Yeah. So I think, so yeah, again, super important, that trust and that rapport. Whatever way you think, yeah, it might be a patch or something on their jacket of a band or something like that. If you recognize it, boom, that's a talking point. Anything that can draw out something that's deep in them that someone hasn't looked at for a long time. Yeah. That, again, I could go on for hours, so I'll just stop it there.
That was a beautiful comment to leave it with. We have time if there's any one final question. Otherwise, lots of people saying this has been really valuable, so I'm glad. Yep, someone says I could listen to Lisa all day, so could I.
Oh, shucks.
Oh, this is an interesting one. Oh my gosh, Geraldine, can we answer this in the next 5 minutes? I was wondering how you maintain a professional relationship post-service, especially when you've developed a good relationship and you've been the main person in their life. So I have a scenario I could talk about with this, but what about you, Lisa? Because you're an effective worker, you still have contact with, hey?
Yeah, it's very, because I need to respect the fact that she's still working in the system, and by us having, it could be a conflict of interest. So it's just like when I achieve something, like I did an interview for The Guardian, and I did a podcast, and I'm doing a video about MSIR and the importance of them opening more programs like that. And like every time I do something like that, I send it to her, because I wouldn't have this platform. I wouldn't be doing any of this had she not planted that seed, you know. So I know that it's not like we get together and go for coffee. It's just every now and then I drop an email. I might get, just a check-in from her every now and then. Just wanted to see how you're going. I heard along the lines that you've achieved this or you've achieved that, or I saw you in this training, or I heard that you were in this training, and she just you're amazing, Lisa. Like, I knew you could do it. It's a relationship, but it's not. Like I said, it's not like we go and have coffee or we meet up or anything like that. It's simply just like an email or a text.
Yeah. So it sounds
every
like
few months or something. Yeah.
You both understand where the kind of line is, and that sounds really lovely.
Yeah. It's brilliant, because I know wholeheartedly, even though she always says, no, it's all you, I would not be here doing this. I'd probably still be a heroin addict. I'd probably, when I had to flee the family violence situation last year, I probably would have gone back to the street, because that's what I know. It's all I know. This has been a whole new learning curve for me, as it is for so many,
Totally. And I, for one, am very fortunate that your effective worker told you about PESP, and it's led you to doing this work, and we get to do these sessions together.
I'm the fortunate one, Rosie. Definitely.
Wow. It's been so valuable, and like the comments are saying, people have loved hearing from you. So we should probably wrap up, but thank you, Lisa.
No, thank you. Thanks for the chat. It's been good to sort of touch on things that I haven't sort of thought about for a while.
So valuable. And thanks everyone for coming. We've had a great turnout, and keep an eye on the CHPE news, or I've got my email in the chat there, so you can contact me directly, and I'll remember to link you in for any future sessions. Otherwise, thanks for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good
day. Bye.
Bye.